What's up, Bulls Nation? My name is Aiden and welcome back to another video. Ladies and gentlemen, today we are going to be discussing which players should be starting in our next preseason game, I guess, against the Denver Nuggets. Now, at the end of the day, you saw what our starting lineup looked like against the Bucks. You kind of saw what everything really came to be in that situation. And we know for a fact that the starting lineup will probably change throughout the course of preseason. So who's going to be taking people's spots in that rotation? Who's going to be starting for the Chicago Bulls? Who's going to be coming off the bench? Who's going to be doing all these things? That's what we're going to be discussing in this specific video. Before we get any further, if you like the video and you want to see more from me, drop a like, drop a follow, and or subscribe if you are new. And let me know in the comments below your thoughts about the Chicago Bulls and who should be starting, I guess, for this Bulls team in that next game against Denver. Now, this video for some might be, I guess, a way to express, okay, new people should be starting. And this video for some others is going to express why the team should be the same heading into this next game against Denver. But what I will say is, regardless of how you feel, we know for a fact that the starting lineup will change eventually. Let's just say I think the Bulls should keep the same starting lineup against Denver. Just because I feel that way, or just because I may say those things, does not necessarily mean that the game after Denver, we should keep it the same that time around, and then the last game around. Again, I think we have 5 preseason games. We now have 4 preseason games, and in those ways, you're going to have to see the rotation change in one way, shape, or form. How else are you going to find the best possible starting lineup we can use in the regular season if you don't change them in preseason and stuff like that? But with that in mind, I do believe this game against Denver, as I kind of already mentioned, a little bit of a sneak peek there, I think we should be keeping this team the same. And the reason why is, I personally feel like one half of basketball in which we saw the starting 5 and we saw how the bench unit would look, I personally don't think that's enough to really analyze what's necessarily best for the Chicago Bulls going forward. You saw Coby White had a great game. Obviously, that's very, very good. You saw Patrick Williams was up and down in that game. That's obviously something that we'll have to work on throughout the regular season. But both of them, in my opinion, I think showed enough and necessarily didn't show enough to kind of be given another chance in the starting 5 to see what they can do. And with that in mind, we know for a fact that the rotation as well will not be the exact same as we saw it against Milwaukee. When we saw the bench unit come into fruition during that time, we saw Patrick Williams as the only starter for that team. We know for a fact that's not going to happen in the regular season. So as much as we're starting to get comfortable with how the rotations will look, how certain players will play, you know, we're starting to get used to Jevon Carter. We're starting to get used to Torrey Craig. We're starting to get used to this, I guess, tempo basketball, and as well as, you know, creating better shots, which we're starting to get used to that. We're going to see a lot more from everybody here. So I do feel like it is probably better in my eyes to at least see Coby White and Patrick Williams start. Look, we know for a fact Vucevic, DeMar, and Zach, if they're all actually going to play, they're going to start. We know that. Unless they're going to pull a Damian Lillard and Giannis and not show up for a preseason game or not play for a preseason game, we know for a fact that our starting 3 are going to play and start for the Chicago Bulls, the big 3, I guess you could say. But I do believe Coby White and Patrick Williams should both start the next game. And then from there, we should see changes for sure. We should see at least one game starting for Ayo. We should see at least one game for Jevon Carter. Maybe even the next 2 games after this Denver game for Jevon Carter. But whatever the case may be, by the last preseason game, this is what I really hope for. The last preseason game now we have, the game that will ultimately lead into the regular season, that's when we need to see the final starting 5, the 5 that we know for a fact, or at least as close to a fact as it can get, we will see starting for the Chicago Bulls in the regular season, the exact rotation that we could potentially see starting in coming into the regular season. We need to see that lineup, those minutes, and everybody that's going to be in the rotation, out of the rotation, starting and coming off the bench. We need to see that in the last preseason game. Until then, it's open season. I personally would like to see Coby White start one more game. I'd like to see Patrick Williams start one more game. But from there, anybody's game. Go ahead, start anybody you like, find your different rotations, find what best suits the Chicago Bulls. This is supposed to be the experimental stage. This is where wins and losses don't matter. This is when you try to find your identity. Training camp is one of the most important aspects of the Chicago Bulls, and preseason is where you see that work in training camp come to life. So again, it makes no sense to see Coby White and Patrick Williams start all 4 or 5 games in preseason. It just doesn't make sense for them. It doesn't make sense for the Bulls, and you're very much, I guess, limiting yourself as a team if you don't expand and see if Jevon Carter can work in the starting lineup. And then even from there, you can figure out minutes and adjustments in game where Coby White might be starting for the Chicago Bulls in the regular season, but Jevon Carter will actually play most of the minutes with that starting big three because he might be able to get the best out of them, but Coby will start the game and maybe Coby will end the game. Do you know what I mean? Very similar to Alex Caruso, how I view Alex Caruso. You know, if you find enough minutes for all these guys and you can see how they fit with certain guys in the rotation, we knew very early on, 2 seasons ago and last season, that Alex Caruso finishes a lot of games for the Chicago Bulls because of his defensive intensity and, I guess, being that glue connector guy with a team. You saw Alex Caruso finish a lot of games for the Chicago Bulls, which is incredible to see. But again, if you don't work on these things in training camp and in preseason, if you don't see Alex Caruso start that one game in preseason, you may never see Alex Caruso finish these games. So it's important in that aspect as well. Just because one person is starting does not mean they're going to end the game, and vice versa. Just because they end the game doesn't mean that they're going to be starting or that they're going to play the most minutes with the starting lineup. We got to keep all these things in mind. These are all things Billy Donovan has to work with. But again, just to kind of sum it up and answer it shortly, I think for the next game against Denver, I want to see the same starting 5, but I want to see the rotation on the bench be a little bit more realistic to how it's going to look in the regular season. I would like to see a Zach LaVine or a DeMar DeRozan come in with maybe a guy like Patrick Williams and see how that works. We know for a fact that the bench 5 will not just be straight bench. You very rarely, for the Bulls and for most teams in the NBA, see a straight bench with no starters coming into the team. So that's something I'd like to see a little bit more realistically for the Chicago Bulls in that next game against Denver. What do you guys think? I'm going to end it here. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to drop a like, follow, and or subscribe if you are new. I will see you in the next one. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay tuned for more. Take care, and peace.